Hello and welcome to 365 Days Towards Racial Change. My name is Tomlins Nyback. Pleasure to see you once again. Thanks for keeping up and hanging in there with me, sticking with the plan. 365 straight days. We're on day 163, moving right along. Life is about to get pretty busy. I'm wondering how I can sustain this. Uh, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Again, I'm Tomlins Nyback. We're here talking about issues in America, black concerns, a lot of history, economics, politics, things like that, dabbling in, international uh, financial literacy, just dabbling, not getting any doctorate's degrees, but as we'll see in the introduction, you'll see my burden for some financial literacy across many disciplines. So on that note, two big thoughts emerge as I continue this process. One is the black mind. Is it still a slave mind? As much liberty, freedom, um, access, civil rights, social integration, all these terms and stuff um, present in American society, does that necessarily mean that the mentality in general of black folks is liberated from uh, hundreds of years of conditioning from generation to generation? I think it's an important question to explore. Also, on the other side, does the white mind of privilege, power, expectation of favor, moving in and out in the nation and the world, uh, is that mentality um, supported, promoted through generations and generations? It's a conditioning on the other side too. The conditioners are conditioned as well. You know, they're conditioned to be at home in that space. Look, we're dealing with a system. It's a white system, created by European whites, for European whites, administered by European whites. You know, uh, I guess black people should, I guess, maybe feel some sense of favor, relief that we get doled out um, access and whatnot in general, and that, our outliers and entertainment and whatnot bubble up to the surface occasionally and whatnot. Uh, in the land of the free and home of the brave. A lot of stuff. So what we're doing, we're untangling a lot of that stuff here. Now, my second thought is my burden for financial literacy among black folks, understanding money, currency. You know, if you're able to understand it and receive it, understanding that those greenbacks, ones, fives, tens, twenties, fifties, hundreds, and so forth. Well, they're just as really valuable as monopoly money. They What gives them their power is that the government backs them and says we must. Uh, this is how we transact, and to refuse to use that, um, like say you wanted to use gold or silver, something really uh, tangible and stable, you're going to run into some problems with that unless you go to the pawn shop. Trust me. But that's how you get some financial literacy. understanding the history of money and things like that. You get some, I tell you, for me, I just get some fundamental and little pieces of history and stuff, and it really opens up um, my mind and my life to doing better, being more conservative with my resources, my limited resources, and my limited uh, access to freedom of movement. I was talking to a white guy at work just recently, and we, we're talking about how tough life is and all that. And I said, and I'm black, so that's a whole nother level. He agreed. He's a white dude. Um, so those are some things to think about. I'm inspired. Uh, the A fire was lit under my backside at the towards the end of 2018. I was introduced, um, not personally, but to the work of a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Um, he's written a bunch, helped presidents get elected, been part of campaigns, education in various parts of the country, has friends internationally, and all that. And he has done me some honor by hollering back. Black folks don't holler back enough. We don't talk enough. We don't listen. We're not humble. All of the above. We just go, 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 because we think we're so right. But this man hollered back, and he's not the only one, I'm sure. He's just a resource I lean on most heavily. I read three of his works. First work I read was a Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. If you only get one of his works, if what I'm saying interests you, and we are coming out of this resource today, get this one book. It will, I believe, it will get you excited um, about um, being black, being interested in this nation's history, its attitude towards black skin. Second resource I read was Black Labor, White Wealth. We did a few days in this just recently. And Dr. Anderson's national plan to empower Black America, Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com and the Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C. Behind me, you see the hashtag #US2 symbol. You find black women there conversing and hanging out, supporting one another. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, or kind of a black Facebook experience. But I just say, we don't put black in the adjectival position so often. That's America, and that's a whole nother discussion. Maybe we'll do a post on that someday. Um, if you can't find your flavor, look, you found me here on the internet. So therefore, you should be able to find your voice and your flavor. If you cannot, there's plenty of spaces giving us this free media device. I'm waiting for the fountain of data to cut off, but I've got hours here loaded up here at YouTube that next year I'm going to massage a little more of this same curriculum, but I haven't seen any red flags go off yet, so we're just going to keep going until that happens. Also, we take a look at fictional life in slave life in America, mid-1800s. Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work, Uncle Tom's Cabin. About time for us to get back to story time. We have story time. Those illustrations, we elaborate on the illustrations and bring factual information interjected in there. Uh, use it as a tool for some commentary about the relationship between blacks and whites. Remember that the kernel, um, the most apparent seed structure of the relationship between blacks and whites in America is hundreds of years of slavery, 400 years easily. That's a conservative view. We can get into dates. Maybe it's various times I may have given specific dates of slavery proper, but um, in the dynamic of the United States of America, blacks were slaves, whites were always on top, privileged and free. And in my opinion, I believe this dynamic still continues in force and with vigor. Um, Blacks numerically are diminishing. We're undergoing incredible attrition. We're being overrun by immigrants at our southern border. You know, I think everybody in the whole world has a right to have some freedoms and a right to life, but right to a good life. But it's interesting. America looks so appealing. And, that's like now that I do this project, I'm like, that says it's a sad world where America is the best you can do because depending on where you find yourself um, is going to determine your level of happiness in the world. So that's something to think about. Okay, we're talking day 163. We're coming out of a Black History Reader, page 91. Question is, it's 101 questions. Today's question 28. We're all over the place. We're not a chronological thing like that. It's too much information to work on. The question is, was Washington D.C. ever both the slave capital and the nation's capital? And to look at that, let's turn back the clock to late 1700s after the Revolutionary War and look at Philadelphia. I've spent a lot of time in that area, seen the original. You'll see the original Liberty Bell. It's in this glass building, and when the government's working right and funding right, you can go in there and see the original Liberty Bell with the crack and how they tried to repair it back then and all this stuff. And Philly was actually the capital from 1790 to 1800 specifically, but Philadelphia had always been the center of politics and commerce for the nation up to that point. So Philly was actually the first um, capital of the United States, and it was the slave capital. You're not going to find um, too much division between commerce, resources, money, and all that language and politics. That they're inextricably linked. They go together. Um, we talk about slave trade, capital of the United States, and all that. First originated in Philly, but everything got packaged up and moved south to Washington, D.C., the district that lies between Maryland and Virginia. And some of a big part of the reasons for a movement was the North was, becoming more abolitionist, uh, more emancipation friendly, and all that. And the North just had a bad taste in its mouth around this public document that it's showing the world and all this. And this is a problem ongoing in America, talking about land of the free, home of the brave. And yet, if someone visits America, you got all these damn slaves running around. It's like, wait a minute, you know. They didn't want to have that, so they didn't want it up north. So North and South separated. We know that story. A civil war is coming um, in about 50 or so years. We're getting into some civil war, some real aggressive language between North and South. But that kind of pressure uh, made the nation say, at least let's move the capital to slave conducive space, and not have it up here in the north where we're talking freedom, abolition, and all that. Let's move it south. So that's what happened. That's how and when Washington D.C. Uh, as was the nation's capital, and slavery followed that as well. Now, in D.C., and you had slave showrooms and all that. I put in a brief note, the logistics. So think about it. These ships are coming from West Africa. It's not, and remember, it's not Norwegian cruise line or anything like that. It is uh, slaves are stacked up, and they're down in the hold. It's probably miasmic. They don't have freedom of movement. They're chained down there. They're secured. It's not like um, general population in prison or something like that. They're all chained up down there, and so they're in the harbor. But when they come in, they either got to wait in the harbor or wait at the docks to be processed. But for health reasons and to them uh, keep their muscles from atrophy. Uh, they did encourage some movement and all that, but it was a process, And if you got lazy handlers and people like that are slow to uh, I don't know, keep pace and all that, not getting you fed right and exercise cleaned up and things like that could be a challenging circumstance, especially in the summer, humidity. So that I interjected that. The movies, like the movies don't show months and months of this. They show highlights and they dramatize and all that. But even after the journey, the trip was over, there's still some waiting around and stuff like that. If you remember Roots, when Kunta Kinte makes landfall, first thing they do is they've got to pull um, probably huge shards and splinters off his back, and they got a hot poker, and they could just cauterize. They chain him up and they cauterize whatever wounds and bed sores because they're on wood. It's not some nice, not even a blow mattress. They're on wood on this immobilized on wood for this ride across the ocean. So they're pretty banged up anyway. So they're, once they actually can get off the ship, they're held in prisons and large pens, all waiting. Go to some stockyards. What I encourage you to do, go drive around the country to see. I used to drive big trucks to see a meat patch, and it's just a big place where they hold cattle. That's the idea. If you can picture that, just big pens of people, resources waiting to be processed. So Washington D.C. had about 200 slave auction marts, chains, long gang lines of chain gangs are being escorted from auction house and moved around the city and stuff like that. A lot of activity, commerce. It's money. It's profit, exploitation. They Washington D.C. Blacks had to be careful. There were free blacks in the nation. I won't say every black um, was a slave, but were battling the institution and the mentality of the times and continuing. And so even free blacks could get caught up, captured, kidnapped. Was not uncommon. Just look at the movie Roots. You see there's a few instances of kidnapped slaves happening through there, and there's no courts. No, your papers are taken. Whatever you know argument the black slave, the black free person can bring up, probably that falls on deaf ears at that point. A famous auction house named Robbie's Pen Auction House, located very near the Capitol building. Dr. Anderson seems to indicate that it's still there today. It could be a museum, could be, and even Abraham Lincoln commented on how close it was to the Capitol building. But it down in D.C., since you had a large number of the politicians still holding slaves and whatnot, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, there's a bunch of guys. Um, the entire Supreme Court held were slaveholders. Much of Congress were slaveholders as well. It was just normal. It was just normal institution there in America. You so you got all that in this system. So Washington D.C. I mean, I need to go. I'm going uh, myself. Going to take a trip back east, and it'd be interesting if I could find a way to put that on my list. I'd like to go see the museum that Oprah Winfrey was a big part of, instrumental, and a lot of other people. Uh, that'd be nice to make that trip down there. So yes, Washington D.C. was not just the nation's capital, but it was also the nation's slave capital for America. Always remember that. Think about the source. We talk about the Constitution. We talk about how America behaves and functions. It's got its surface, its shell. What it uh, presents itself as publicly, but it's also, think about what's grinding, what uh, what's the inner workings of the nation, how it works. Be mindful. Like we can't sit around or move about, buying stuff and coming and going and think that, especially black people, and I think all people think that we are um, living self-determined lives. I don't think we are, and that's a big part. If I can get us as a group to wake up to that. Are we living the life we want? You know, not after we pay taxes and after we're lied to and after uh, we have to believe that the government's classified documents are in our best interest, and as politicians run up huge bills and government shuts down and rhetoric, propaganda about in other nations, world leaders. We get fed. And I'm hoping that this nation is telling me the truth about places like Iran, North Korea, Russia, um, elements, in the Middle East and stuff like that. I only know what I can get here in the media and things like that. Understanding that there's an element. The United States may decry state-run television and how other governments encroach on the um, human rights violations and things like that. But where's America really at? If not in practice, where's America at in its heart? Okay, we talk often here about the Constitution and how that those foundational documents, some of those uh, fundamental decisions that were made uh, back in the early 1600s and stuff. You know, what in some cases we've made laws to cover up um, some important legislation that puts blacks at a disadvantage. I'd rather see all of that stuff overturned, not covered up with amendments and ongoing. You know, uh, check that out. Is there a difference between a law that disadvantages black people being overturned versus amended? Right? We'll take the Bible for instance. Jesus said, you don't put new wine in old wineskins; it bursts. You got to make new. Um, so think about that if you understand the Dred Scott decision, um, various um, doctrines, legislations enacted by various states and colonies in those early years. Think about how that and bring that up to the present and attitude towards black folks' attitude towards white folks. A lot of things. You know, we got to keep being transparent. You know, I'm beginning to put together this workshop summit that I've been invited to. Uh, Very appreciative of that. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of message I come up with. I want to be helpful, informative. I want to provide some education, but I will still want to be true to this message, what we're doing here, why we're doing it. You know, um, so getting back, blacks, I say we're not as free as we want to be, simply because we do not self-determine our lives. We're still compelled to uh, spend our time and energy, time, one of our greatest resources, doing an other's bidding. Like when did it become such a religion, like to have a job? You notice we don't have a whole big movement for um, entrepreneurship and um, business creation, education, and things like that. someone's offering me a job, offering me the opportunity to enrich them. And it's like a big favor. It's slavery. It's slavery. Nice one word sums it all up. Slavery. So there's a look at our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. I'm Tumlin's Nyback. That's day 163 out of the way. Come back, meet me tomorrow. I'm feeling story time is probably good space to look in on old Tom and Eva, see what they've been up to in the garden lately. So come back soon tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out. Bye bye.